They are the kings of the Australian outback.
You've got to concentrate all the time.
Some of the biggest trains in the world.
If things go wrong with these things, normally makes a big mess.
On epic journeys through a hostile continent.
I don't know what we're going to do. Just slow down and blow the horn.
A nation depends on them.
Oh, go boys, get into it.
And the teams that keep these metal monsters on the tracks. Hauling huge loads of food, freight and mineral riches across incredible distances.
We are out in the middle of nowhere, that's for sure.
Big trains, big country. On Railroad Australia, on board one of the toughest rail journeys on the planet. A super train crossing the scorching Australian continent.
The major concern is we could have derailed.
Running non-stop for 2 days.
Because sometimes you don't make it.
It's man and machine in the ultimate endurance test. On the rugged west coast, an ore train 100 wagons long. The workhorses of $1 billion industry. But what happens if the trains stop?
Shutting the railway down is not a very fun game.
And riding the roughest rails to nowhere.
It's when their fur touches the train that it starts getting close.
A vintage outback train, still running, picking up the strangest passengers.
Having a long, drawn-out death in the sun, no animals deserve that.
At the maintenance sheds of Melbourne freight company SCT Logistics, 3 locomotives are getting ready for a marathon 6,000-kilometre trek. Starting in Melbourne, across to Adelaide, and then over the continent to the most isolated city in Australia, Perth, and back again. Like going from London to New York by train. Nearly 2 kilometres long. As tall as a 2-storey house. These super-sized trains supply Australia's most isolated city. If they don't get through, the supermarket shelves start to empty.
We've got 4,500 tonne and we've got about 1,650 metres.
At top speeds of 110 kilometres an hour, the drivers have plenty to worry about. Gusting winds that could blow their double-stacked containers off the rails. Track buckle from the blistering heat. Floods washing away the tracks from under them.
The train came apart, and at that stage we didn't know what was wrong.
It's tough out there.
First thing I'm going to do is check the level in the oil level in the compressor.
And Graham Smith has to make sure these long-distance workhorses can face this hostile country.
We just have just a general look around to make sure there's no pipes leaking, or there's a few rubber pipes there to make sure they haven't split.
There's already been a casualty on the trip back from Perth. A wheel set on one of the towering refrigeration wagons needs replacing.
Changing this wheel because of these spalls. The chunks of metal that have been missing from the wheel. As it rolls over the rail, it makes a thumping noise. So a thump, 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 and that ruins the track. Surprisingly enough, it's easier to change one of these than it is to change a car wheel, as long as you've got a forklift.
Got a locomotive that weighs 126 tonnes on top of me at the moment. Especially on the Nullarbor Plain, these locomotives will unfortunately hit camels.
Camels and other wild animals. Sheep and stray cattle.
They make one hell of a mess. Just wash it off and send it out again.
Loading up these mega trains are machines with incredible strength, lifting 30-ton containers like cardboard boxes. Inside giant cold rooms, milk, ice cream and other perishables are loaded into refrigerated cars. Out on the desolate Nullarbor, temperatures can reach a scorching 50 degrees and more. Inside these wagons, it will stay at -18. It's not just the desert that needs crossing. Between Melbourne and Perth, there are also the Adelaide Hills.
The Adelaide Hills are horrendous.
Steep grades that push a train to its limits.
Long, windy, there's a lot of curves. Locomotives hate curves. They try to climb up over the rails.
These hills are tough in the dry. Water on the line can cause havoc. The SCT train is due here in a few hours, and the forecast is for rain. From Melbourne, 4,000 kilometres away, to the mighty ore carriers of Western Australia, the biggest and heaviest trains in the world. Stretching up to 4 kilometres in length, they snake through the wilds of the outback over red-hot dirt. Each train load can be worth up to $2 million. A nation's economy depends on keeping these wheels turning night and day. At the Carrara mine site, 400 kilometres northeast of Perth, giant loaders are hard at work, filling over 100 wagons of a bulk ore train carrying iron ore magnetite. It's a massive operation.
Last financial year, we shipped 9.4 million tonnes.
And it's George Savell's job to keep it all moving. Keeping these trains running between the mine and the port of Geraldton, 200 kilometres away. Getting it off the trains and into ships, bound for the hungry steel mills of China. George is the boss of a multi-million-dollar operation.
$500,000 a day, just in rail costs alone.
But today, he's got problems. A dangerously high tide and its surging currents have closed the port.
For those that haven't heard of tidal surge before, it's a fairly heavy storm current that comes out of the southern oceans. And for us, unfortunately, Champion Bay, where we have our port, is perfectly positioned to funnel the tidal surge.
The extreme tides have brought the loading of the bulk ore carrier Illawarra Fortune to a standstill, with other empty ships standing idle out at sea. At this stage, George's trains are still running. So is the high-tech unloading facility. Tipping 2 wagons at a time, taking less than 2 minutes to empty a set. Right now, ore is flooding in, mountains of it, but it's not going out, and that's a huge problem.
The whole time that vessel sits there and we're not loading it is time that we're filling the shed and starting to get towards capacity. If the Illawarra doesn't sail on Friday morning, we'll be staring down the barrel of shutting the railway down.
From the west, across the continent, to the tropics of far North Queensland. Get ready for one of the wildest train rides you'll ever take. Along some of the roughest track and toughest terrain in the outback. This is the Savannah Lander. And Lee Johns and Will Kemp are its drivers.
I've never ever got up in the morning and thought, work.
It's like no other job. Spectacular scenery.
Down there, you've got yourself a crocodile.
Bashing along century-old bush tracks. Stopping to help stranded strangers.
Oh, buddy.
All in a day's work for this extraordinary relic from the past. Will and Lee's outback adventure starts in the Cairns rail workshops. before the sun has risen.
Right, mate, setting back. Copy.
They're heading out on an 800-kilometre round trip. They'll be travelling from Cairns in tropical far north Queensland, 420 kilometres west to the old gold mining outpost of Forsyth. It's wet outside, and there's a mountain range to climb before they hit the outback.
Light rain can be a little problematic with the wheels spinning a lot. So where we're heading up this morning, up the McAllister Range towards Kuranda, through rainforest areas. So what you get then is the leaves from the trees in the rainforest laying on top of the track. Wheels go over the leaves, crush the leaves into an oil, and then mixed with the water, of course, becomes very, very slippery.
The right-hand side is going to give you the good views. Thank you.
High up in the mountain range, the weather is closing in.
Welcome aboard the Savannalander for whatever you're doing this week. There's various different trips on board, whether you're going to Mareeba or Kuranda.
If the rain gets any heavier, these passengers may not be going anywhere. It's a clear evening in Melbourne, but at the SCT depot, it's the weather 700 kilometres away that's the concern.
Okay, thanks, mate.
It's raining in the hills outside Adelaide, and that could mean trouble for this train.
The Adelaide Hills have probably got a 1 in 40 grade, which is about as steep as you can get. But with the length and the weight of our train, the actual drag makes it a harder journey for the guys.
Mechanic Graham Smith has to make sure his locos are well armed for the fight.
This box here has, I think it's 76 kilograms of sand in there.
Plenty of sand for when the wheels start slipping.
It supplies sand through here, out the nozzle, and sprays sand into that area there.
After 24 hours of prepping and loading, 3MP9 is ready to get going. Destination, Perth, more than 3,000 kilometres away. Drivers Mark Wolverson and Paul Matley will be in charge of the first leg of this cross-continent marathon. They'll do the first leg out of Melbourne.
And you should have the release and we're right to go. Over.
You should have a signal any second.
Roger, thanks control.
Paul will drive.
Right to go when you get the light, driver.
While Mark does the paperwork and communicates with track control.
Got the light, we're going.
2 SCT spotters will watch every inch of the train as it rolls out of the depot, checking for anything that could cause a problem. An open door, a loose hose, a noise that isn't right.
See you later.
The train is pulling its own crew car, its own mini hotel with 5 air-conditioned bedrooms, shower, kitchen and a lounge area.
So it is a home away from home.
Boss Andrew sometimes joins his crew on the Perth trip to keep him in touch with the problems his drivers encounter.
1,652 metres for a gross weight of 5,043 tonnes. It's a big train.
See you on the return.
3MP9 is picking up speed, but it's an unusually rough, noisy ride through Melbourne's outer suburbs.
We're probably doing about 60 odd kilometres an hour at the moment. At that rate will take us about 15 to 20 minutes to clear the outskirts of Melbourne. When you're out on the Nullarbor, mainline speed's 110 kilometres an hour. When we reach Adelaide, 4 drivers will get on. They will have their own crew car similar to this one, though they're taken through to Perth and back.
But Perth is 3 days away, and 3MP9 is about to run into trouble.
When they arrive
back in Adelaide. Another 2 drivers will relieve them to bring them through to Horsham, and then another 2 drivers.
3,000 kilometres away, near the port of Geraldton. Another train laden with 7,000 tonnes of iron ore magnetite has arrived at the Carrara port facility. A dangerous high tide has stopped ships being loaded, but the trains running to the port are still being emptied.
Yeah, Roger, I got here by 13 to 16, that's all good? That's all good. Roger, mate, cheers.
This is the vital link between the mine and the dockside.
Yeah, 761, that's pretty good there. Can I get your loco brakes on when you're ready?
Roger that, loco brakes replied.
These tippers can unload a 100-wagon train in 2 hours. Lasers are used to guide the cars into exactly the right position for tilting. Today, the tipping is being controlled by Mark Horn. His computer's monitoring the movement of every wagon. But this morning, the punctual arrival of each train is giving Carrara Operations Manager George Savell a big headache. The ships can't be loaded, and the ore stockpile is growing into a small mountain.
We only have so much shed room in Gerald, and once that shed room is full, we have to shut the railway down. Shutting the railway down is not a very fun game.
At this stage, we've got room for 2 more trains to fit in the shed, and then we may be looking at cancellations.
And George's day is about to get worse. Back at the mine, one of the loader drivers has also run into trouble.
I just heard a hissing noise in the cabin, and I looked down at the temperature gauge, and there she was up where she wasn't supposed to be, and yeah, then I got out, had a look, and seen the leak.
Andrew Williams' Perth-bound freight train has got off to a bumpy start.
And then another 2 drivers. What'd you hit then?
It's hit something hard, and the emergency brakes have locked on.
You receiving, Mark?
Yeah, sorry, Andrew, we're pulling up, mate. We've lost our air.
Okay, thanks. I've lost the air.
Air pressure that runs from the locomotives through the train keeps the brakes off the wheels. When it's lost, the brakes clamp on automatically. This train's going nowhere.
Yeah, Geelong Control, 3MP9 at Elders. Lara, we've lost our air, mate, just letting you know. Over.
Yeah, no worries, thanks, mate.
There's a fair jump in the track, so we could have uncoupled some wagons. That's happened in this section before. It can be quite rough.
Roger, thank you. We're going back to investigate. I'll let you know.
Guys have to pull the train to a stop now, and then they'll get out and they'll walk the train till they find what the problem is.
The major concern is we could have derailed, then another train could come along and run into the wreckage. Yeah, just a hose bag that's come undone, mate, about 6 in the front.
While the fixing of a loose air hose is simple, now the drivers must pump the air pressure back up.
And the air should be coming up.
To get this train moving again.
Okay, mate. This is what we call the hose bag, and this allows the air to go through continuous through the whole train. And with that come apart, all the brakes have come on because all the air's escaped from the train. It's pretty unusual for that to happen, but it can happen. That's pretty lucky actually that it's so close to the front, because as you know we're 1.6 kilometres long, and Murphy's Law is it's normally right at the back, but lucky this time. No more excitement.
Okay, boss. You like it, son?
July Control, over on the way, Received and understood. Thanks, driver. Thanks for all your help with telling us about that.
3MP9 is rolling again. 30 kilometres down, 3,000 kilometres and more than half a continent still to cross. From Melbourne, 3,000 kilometres north to tropical Cairns, where drivers Lee and Will and their Savannah Lander train are struggling through the Kuranda Ranges. Their passengers are ready for the ultimate outback adventure, but the train has to make it over the mountains first. And today, that may not be possible. Steady rain is making what's usually a slow run into a constant battle for traction.
That greasy track sure is causing a bit of havoc at the moment.
Nature's various elements are conspiring against them. Rainforest leaves full of oil have settled on the tracks. Add water and a slippery film covers the rails. Greasy tracks and a steep climb are the train's worst enemy.
What I'm doing, of course, I'm staring at my speedo down here, which is, I can see when it starts to, of course, jump up, I can notice that my wheels are spinning. So what I have to do is I have to get off the throttle really quickly, allow them to settle back down, and then just gently reapply the throttle, just hopefully I'll get some traction so we can continue up this hill.
The passengers have no idea about the struggle Lee's having up front.
Yeah, still slipping. You get build up of leaf over a period of a couple of weeks. And then, of course, that little bit of rain, like we said before, it just really bad. So it makes it really hard to manage. If we do start to spin, I just quickly jump on this little pedal on my right foot down below, and that drops some sand underneath those drive wheels. So I've been using that a fair bit this morning. I'd be surprised if there's anything in there. We've got pretty powerful engines in these days, but it still only gets powered through one single axle. So the power going to that one axle just tends to send it a little bit crazy. But this is a bit right here where I've been stuck before.
Still only halfway up the range and losing momentum on the worst part. At the Carrara mine, George Savell's day has just gone from bad to worse. On top of a closed port that could shut his railway down, one of his loaders has sprung a leak and is out of action.
How's she looking there, Dale?
Fluid is spilling out from underneath.
I think we just sprung a bit of a coolant leak, so I'm just going to jump up top and have a look. Looks like it might be coming out around the aircon there somewhere. Can I get someone straight down the rail for us? Loader 74's got a coolant leak.
A loader down when there's a train waiting to be filled is bad news. George has to keep the operation running at both ends. If the tide changes, they'll start filling the ships, and this train will have to go. The huge steel buckets on these machines eat through the 10-metre high stockpile in amazingly quick time. It's fast and furious, but it also has to be precise. Every scoop has to be delivered into the rail wagon the right way. The metal bucket can never hit the train.
The cars, well, the hoppers only sit on there by a little central pin. It's more the weight bearing down on them that holds them there. So, if we make contact with that, there's every chance we could probably knock it off the pin and dislodge it. You sort of got to get cranes in and all that, lift it back on.
Each load has to be the right weight.
So I've got dirt in my bucket now. This is going to weigh the dirt.
And spread the right way.
If you can't get that right, there's potential of what they call a push-pull effect. So that's one wagon's fully loaded and it's pulling it, and the other one's trying to push it, and your light wagon that's inside
There's potential for it, just with the effect that it could lift off the rails.
Two loaders doing the job of three puts more pressure on the drivers. But despite the deadlines, getting the job done right and safely is always more important than getting it done quickly. Fast work by the on-site mechanics gets the loader fixed in just under an hour.
Get her back on the run and load this train and send her on its way.
The trains continue to run for now, but the port is still closed. The surging high tide has now turned into a super low tide.
We've now got low water levels in the harbour off the back of a surge. You get atmospheric pressure and so on pushes the water down and you get less tide in the harbour than what's expected. If the low water continues, we may have to sail the boat light, and that means dead freight for the company. We'll pay for space on the boat that we haven't used.
Stockpiles are continuing to back up on shore. The storage sheds are now close to capacity. Another 7,000 tonnes of ore is the last thing that's needed.
If we get any other surge or any other weather events come in, we could have the boat stuck in here again, and that'll shut the railway down.
Outside Melbourne, SCT freight train 3MP9 is on the move again after hitting a bad piece of track.
Advice control, and they've given us the all clear to keep moving.
Despite the unscheduled stop, the train is back running on time. Just before the Victoria-South Australia border, they'll swap crew. A midnight changing of the guard. The next team will need to be fresh for what's ahead.
All right, have a good trip. Take it easy. See you, mate. See you later, lads.
Nothing there, mate?
Yeah, mate.
All right? Yeah, we're ready to roll as soon as we get a signal.
Green on top, mate.
On the green.
The new driving team is Ricky Graham and Andy Bishop. Ahead of them is one of the toughest stretches of rail track in Australia.
We have an 8-hour run from Horsham to Adelaide, and we're fairly challenging at times.
Between them and Adelaide are the Adelaide Hills, 50 kilometres of sharp bends and steep grades.
You go up and down a fair bit, but then you actually pull the train up towards Mount Lofty, which is the top of the Adelaide Hills.
They're tough work for any train, but for this 1.6 kilometre long monster weighing over 5,000 tonnes, they can be a nightmare.
Sometimes you don't make it, sometimes you stall, unfortunately. And of course you get up, then you've got to come down. So yeah, that's a challenge too with your braking.
It comes down to momentum and making sure you hit the bottom of a dip at track speed so that you can keep your momentum up to crest over the top of the hill.
And rain is the last thing they need.
A good downpour, it can cause hassles with our traction.
Before the hills, they have to cross the Murray River on a narrow bridge built nearly 100 years ago.
And that's quite spectacular because you've got no guardrail around part of the actual bridge.
As the train slows, it's an eerie experience. On approach, there's nothing between them and the 30-metre drop into the blackness below. After the bridge, they hit the Adelaide Hills. The serious climb has started, and ominously, the rain is back.
The rain's getting heavier now. I feel it's slipping a bit more. If the train's going around quite a few curves, it creates a lot of drag on the train, so it compounds the amount of tonnage we got. We've got down to 25 kilometres an hour at the moment.
Ricky needs to keep the momentum going or risk stalling.
I've stalled a couple of times on the hill, actually close to Mount Lofty. Tad embarrassing, but sometimes you can restart your train and lift the load again, or sometimes you might have to get rescued by the cavalry, so they might send out another locomotive and they'll attach to the front and help you pull you over the top, or a train might have to come from behind and give you a bit of a push up the hill.
Yeah, it's dropped under 20 kilometres an hour, so as long as it's still moving. You can feel it actually struggling. So it doesn't like this at the moment.
Momentum is everything, but they're slowly losing it. The train's speed is dropping fast.
Let the loco do its thing and hopefully they keep going forward.
The 3 locomotives are pulling a massive 62 wagons. The wheels are screaming out for more traction.
The locomotive's sanding, slaying sand on the track, so to create a bit more adhesion. If we stop, well then we're in trouble.
At the port in Geraldton, there's finally some good news for rail manager George Savelle. The tide has turned, and there's now enough water to support the loading of the Illawarra Fortune.
At the moment, we're going to fill the boat to its capacity.
70,000 tonnes have to be loaded before the next high tide, when this ship is due to sail. That will be more than $5 million worth sitting in these holds.
We think we'll get out Friday morning. We think we'll be able to keep the railway running.
But there's also bad news. With another 100 wagons of iron ore magnetite heading towards the port, there's a problem with the unloading machinery. All emptying of the trains has stopped. Supervisor Mark Horn has a warning message on his screen. Tipping can't go ahead.
Those 2 green lines, if they're not up, the wagon's not in position.
He'll have to find a way to nudge the car into alignment.
Go into manual and just bump it forward. Why not?
It's still not right.
It seemed to have a fault in the position, it doesn't want to come down.
They've started to load the ship. The huge stockpile is disappearing. There are other ships that also have to be filled, and if Mark can't get his loading problem fixed soon, they'll run out of ore. On the Savannah Lander, Lee is still struggling with wheels slipping in the wet. The motor on their vintage train is working overtime, straining up the steep grades. It's a grind on wet tracks. Lee has been manually laying sand.
The sand being blasted by air underneath the wheel trying to get traction, so the sand is just like grip. So it gets under there and it crushes the sand down and creates something for it to stick to. Rather than it being just steel to steel, it gives it a little bit of a bit of grip.
And it's doing the trick.
Yeah.
The track in front starts to flatten. At last, he's getting full traction, picking up speed. Soon, the train they call the Silver Bullet is firing again. But with speed comes danger. The Savannah Lander is a once-a-week service. Car drivers forget that it runs. It's the last thing people expect to see.
You really are just dicing with death. Certainly don't stop on a 5-cent piece. If you do drive out in front of us, we put the emergency brakes on, but the wheels most times lock up and they just start sliding. You're still doing 40, 50, 60 k's an hour.
At the next town, Will has an important job to do.
I'll get it. Yeah.
From here on, there are no electronic signals. It's too remote. Instead, a primitive rail safety procedure from the 1830s is still used.
Once we get to this point, things get pretty old school.
Next to his mobile phone sits a more basic way to communicate: the wooden staff.
You run a relay, you carry a baton, and then you pass that baton on as you go. And we need the baton or staff to use that piece of track. So that says Machilba Almaden. As long as we've got this, we know that there's no other trains on the line anywhere between Machilba and Almaden, because they would have to have this in order to be there.
With this piece of wood on board allowing him to travel, holder of the baton Will gets the Savannalander underway, knowing for sure that his train is the only one on the track, which is just as well. As Will spots something that makes him stop.
I just saw something I just want to double check.
Will started out life as a zookeeper, which comes in handy on a bush train.
Looks like there's a little fruit bat, a little red flying fox just caught on the barbed wire fence on the left-hand side. And you know, I know a lot of people think they're a pest, but having a long, drawn-out death in the sun, no animal deserves that.
There's a good reason most people would leave this helpless animal to its fate. Some Australian bats carry a deadly virus that can make a simple scratch fatal to humans. But Will isn't going to let this little fella suffer.
So the important thing with these is if you're not immunised, don't touch them.
Like Will, you're only protected if you've had a common rabies vaccination.
It gets almost impossible to untangle the poor little fellas. But if the hole's not too big, there's no skeletal damage, then it shouldn't take too much at all.
Luckily for the new passenger, help is just down the track, at the next stop.
So a friend of mine, Marjorie, she's a wildlife carer just over at the post office that she runs.
Will and Lee hand the fruit bat over to the postmistress.
I don't think the hole in his wing's too bad.
Hello, darling.
Her shop sometimes doubles as an animal shelter.
Oh, yes, I won't disturb him.
Marjorie has just the right packaging for her feisty new friend.
Don't fly out. Right, stay in there. There you go. Done.
Thank you, Marjorie.
That's all right.
Soon the Savannalander is back on its way, still more than a day away from its destination. The passengers already have a story to tell about the day they rode through the outback in the Batmobile. At the Carrara loading facility in Geraldton, George Savelle has a new problem holding up his multi-million-dollar supply line.
Yeah. It's just off, isn't it? Yeah.
The tippers that empty the ore trains aren't working. In the control room, operator Mark Horn is trying to find out what's wrong.
Lowering clamps.
His computer alerted him to the problem. Now it needs human intervention.
I seem to have a fault in the position that doesn't want to come down. So I'll probably call up a Sparky and get him to save me.
Disruptions like these can stop the trains and the filling of the ships. There's one parked offshore, the Galaxy, patiently waiting its turn. Delays are hugely expensive.
Yeah, give me a minute. I got wagon not in position.
This fault needs to be fixed, and fixed fast.
My position arm won't go down. Can you have a look and see what I'm doing wrong?
I'm looking for the alignment of the plan. So the thing to hold the train down when it doesn't step.
These super efficient machines can empty this train in less than 2 hours. But when something goes wrong, technology can be your enemy.
It has its little glitches, has its moments, I think.
The technician can't find anything that's obviously wrong. That leaves the computer as the likely culprit. It is.
I think I got it.
After all the drama,
Are you all good to go, or are you still waiting?
You're good for a tip.
Roger, mate. Cheers.
all it takes is a simple mouse click to get the multi-million-dollar unloading operation up and running again.
Copy. Piers and Teenies have finally got all heading towards the shed. Yeah, cheers, Smitzel.
Crisis over.
Good news.
George has managed to keep the trains running.
We'll get the Illawarra out to sea and we'll bring the Galaxy in and maintain continuous operations.
The wagons tipping and the ship sailing.
JJ signed off. We're ready to go.
Good work.
Perth-bound 3MP9 is struggling through the punishing grades of the Adelaide Hills. Steady rain making its fight for traction even harder.
A bit of rain around at the moment, so the track's fairly greasy.
Despite having 3 locomotives at full throttle, it's slow going. At times on this notorious climb, the train speed has dropped to below 10 kilometres an hour.
So it's a lot of balance between the train dynamics to control the train speed.
But driver Ricky Graham has managed to keep momentum. Not much, but enough to suggest he's winning the battle with the mountain. There's one last climb before they're out of trouble. One last push to the top. It's a snail's pace, but at least they're moving.
And then down the other side, down through Belair and down through to Adelaide.
Adelaide's outer suburban stations are a welcome sight as 3MP9 picks up speed heading into the South Australian capital. Another welcome sight is the rising sun. It's been a long night, but this train still has a long way to go. The next leg of its journey is a 2,000-kilometre slog across the infamous Nullarbor Plain.
It gives you appreciation of just how big and wide Australia is and how much nothing there can be out there.
And the desert will have its own unique dangers waiting for them. Next time on Railroad Australia, 3MP9 charges towards Perth, but no one told the farmer moving his sheep.
We've come along to 110 and wiped out half the third.
Big train, even bigger mountain. Is 12,000 horsepower enough? And Will and Lee find another difficult passenger, but this one is even harder to handle.